Chapter 179. 6 senses were sealed. To be exact, Xianxian only sealed the guy's 5 senses: eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, and mind. The other 5 senses were all sealed by Xianxian, leaving only his consciousness. No one in the mortal world could learn such a brilliant technique. Only Xianxian, who used to be an almighty immortal, knew this technique. Being conscious meant that he could think and did not fall into a coma. If he wanted to escape, it would be best if he was conscious, but under the premise that his 5 senses were sealed, it would not be luck, but a nightmare. He could not hear, see, smell, taste, or even touch. To be more serious, after his consciousness was sealed, he could not even feel cold, warm, painful, or itchy at all. It was as if he was forever exiled in a space where there was nothing, and even the passage of time was not clear. Under such circumstances, it was a torture to be conscious. The guy who was sealed almost went crazy. Every day in despair, he hoped that one day he could feel everything familiar again. Even if he was asked to die immediately, he was willing. "I will tell you whatever you want to ask. I only ask for a quick death." When the guy was released by Xianxian, he almost shed tears on the spot. He did not care where he was at all. He only wanted to die quickly. During the time when he was sealed, he did not even want to experience the helplessness and despair for a second. He would rather die quickly than be imprisoned like that again. The palace master and the law enforcement hall chief Meng Xian looked at each other and seemed to be a little surprised. When Liang Xiaoming saw this person, he was also shocked. When he heard what he said, his face changed greatly. If there was a witness and material evidence, Chu Heng could no longer be saved. When the witness told everything he knew like a bamboo tube pouring beans, everyone was already angry. The Taishanmen dared to target Chunyang Palace like this. They did it when Xianxian first entered the sect, when he climbed the heaven ladder, and now they even sent people to kill him? This was a slap in the face of Chunyang Palace. With only one witness, Liang Xiaoming still wanted to fight for his disciple. However, just as he started to argue, Yang Chen had already gotten another witness. Not long after he finished speaking, another one appeared. 4 in a row. Liang Xiaoming knew that Chu Heng was finished. "Hallmaster Su, go and negotiate with the Taishanmen and ask them to give us an explanation." There was no joy or anger on the face of the palace master, but his voice contained a strong anger. "The disciples of our Chunyang Palace are not to be bullied or slandered by others. I want the Taishanmen to give me an explanation for the incident of climbing the stairway to heaven." Palace Master, during the heaven stairway, Taishanmen lost 3 Jedon Grandmasters if you mention it. Su Qingxin, as the hall master of the Foreign Affairs Hall, was tactful in handling matters, and relatively more things to consider. Wouldn't the palace master provoke the Taishanmen by asking him to negotiate like this? The loss of 100 Jedon realm masters was also their greatest heaven sect's fault. They still have to account for it. The palace master considered more things than Su Qingxin, but he also saw the problem from a higher perspective. You just go and negotiate, and don't pay attention to other things. When the juniors of the law enforcement hall heard the words of the palace master, they were naturally excited. The palace master was so willing to stand up for his disciples that he did not hesitate to fight against the top Taishanmen in the world. At this moment, several disciples in the law enforcement hall wished that they could die for Chunyang Palace. Even though they knew that Chunyang Palace and Taishanmen could not have any big conflict in this matter, Yang Chen still felt very good. The reason why he rejoined Chunyang Palace was not unrelated to the protection of the disciples by Chunyang Palace in the beginning. As long as Liang Xiaoming of the Bright Moon Palace was not allowed to be the palace master, everything would be fine. Lord Liang. After talking about the external affairs, the palace master of Chunyang Palace turned to Liang Xiaoming, looked at the lord of the Bright Moon Palace, and said, "Chu Heng colluded with outsiders and killed his fellow disciples. There are witnesses and material evidence. What else do you have to say?" "I dare not." The identity of the lord of the Bright Moon Palace did not bring Liang Xiaoming any privilege in front of the palace master of Chunyang Palace. Under the palace master's gaze, Liang Xiaoming lowered his head and did not dare to say anything. "No objection?" The palace master of Chunyang Palace asked again. Liang Xiaoming stared at the ground under the feet of the palace master and shook his head lightly, with a regretful expression on his face. Meng Xian, as a disciple of Chunyang Palace, Chu Heng colluded with outsiders and killed his fellow disciples. He is guilty of the most heinous crime. Fortunately, Yang Chen is safe. Chu Heng's cultivation will be abolished and he will be expelled from the sect. Liang Xiaoming had no objection. The palace master turned to Meng Xian, the lord of the law enforcement hall, and said, "Recall Chu Heng and let the disciples of the law enforcement hall execute him." "Yes, palace master." Meng Xian bowed and answered. Chu Heng's crime had been determined. Even Liang Xiaoming could not protect him. Yang Chen. After announcing Chu Heng's crime, the palace master handed over Yang Chen. Yang Chen hurriedly answered and stood next to Liang Xiaoming in the middle. Abolish his cultivation and expel him from the sect. This is the punishment of the Chunyang Palace. As for the personal grudge between you and him, you deal with it yourself. The palace master said calmly, but everyone could hear the killing intent in his words. One could imagine the result of a guy whose cultivation had been abolished facing Yang Chen, who wanted to solve his personal grudge. "Thank you, palace master, for upholding justice." Yang Chen thanked him. The palace master was like a roundworm in his stomach. He even knew that Yang Chen wanted to kill Chu Heng with his own hands and gave such an order. Apart from thanking him, what else could Yang Chen say? Temple Master Liang. The matter was not over yet. The palace master of Chunyang Palace once again turned to Liang Xiaoming. "You have a bad judgment of people and failed to teach them well. You are also responsible. You are punished to face the wall for 10 years and reflect on your mistakes. In addition, you will be responsible for rewarding Yang Chen with the materials of the flying sword." "Yes, palace master." Liang Xiaoming did not resist at all. On the surface, Liang Xiaoming actually acted as an accomplice this time. He refined the Qianquan bag that originally belonged to Yang Chen. Although he could say that he was deceived by Chu Heng, who knew the inside story, it was just that the palace master did not intend to pursue this matter. If Liang Xiaoming still insisted on it, he would jump out himself. "Yang Chen, you climbed to the top of the celestial ladder. I should have given you a reward earlier, but you had not reached the foundation building realm at that time, so the reward was delayed." The palace master of Chunyang Palace once again encouraged Yang Chen. "Now that you have become an inner disciple, the promised foundation building elixir is useless. In this case, you will be converted into 10,000 contribution points. In addition, your master will refine a flying sword suitable for you. I hope you will practice diligently and make further progress. As for the place to practice, you can choose any cave residence within the range of Meiqing Mountain." Chapter 180. Thank you, Palace Master. Yang Chen bowed again to express his gratitude. At this moment, since he was already an inner sect disciple, all the rewards promised by the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace had to be fulfilled in a short period of time. However, such a reward or punishment, for Yang Chen, there was not much that moved him. He did not lack all the resources. Just now, in the series of punishments given by the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace, only the Taishanman had to give an explanation, which showed his support for Yang Chen. However, then again, the Taishanman had to give an explanation for the Heaven Stairway incident. This incident had already happened for 7 or 8 years. Why didn't they give an explanation before? Yang Chen understood very well that even if he was a genius disciple, he was only a genius disciple in the Qi refining stage. After the Heaven Stairway gathering was completed, it was not worth it to completely fall out with the Taishanman because of him, and it was not worth it to ask the Taishanman for an explanation because of him alone. They had already lost several Jedan stage masters. What else did they need to explain? But now it was obviously very different from the past. Since the news that Yang Chen had successfully refined the heaven-seizing pill spread, Yang Chen was no longer a simple genius disciple in the foundation establishment stage, but a helper that could let many Yuanying stage masters and even Deshang stage masters see the hope of ascending. Ordinary geniuses could only improve their own ability and improve the reputation of the sect a little. However, such a superb alchemist master was more than that. The benefits that a senior alchemist master could bring to the sect were simply innumerable. It could even be said that in the end, it would be no problem for the Chunyang Palace to get the support of a large number of powerful people. Comparing before and after, of course, the treatment was not the same. In the past, the attitude of Chunyang Palace was only strong support. At this time, it was natural to reflect the desperate support for Xianxia. The grievances that Xianxia had suffered in the past must be taken back. The conspiracy that Xianxia had suffered in the past must be given a reasonable explanation. The damage that Xianxia had suffered in the past would be returned to the masterminds at this time. Anyway, from now on, Xianxia was the spokesperson of Chunyang Palace. Any conspiracy against Xianxia must be resolutely smashed and fought back to ensure that Xianxia would not have any problems. How could Xianxia not think of the current palace master of Chunyang Palace? Xianxia's friends might only see the Chunyang Palace's support for Xianxia, but they did not know these considerations. Xianxia had a good impression of the Chunyang Palace, and it was all because of his master in the fierce Sun Hall. Now, the Medicine Hall, the External Affairs Hall, and the Law Enforcement Hall might also be added. However, Xianxia had never had a good impression of the current palace master of Chunyang Palace and the Bright Moon Hall. Speaking of it, although the current palace master of Chunyang Palace was not bad, he was still somewhat partial to the Bright Moon Hall. Otherwise, the Bright Moon Hall master Liang Xiaoming would not have betrayed Gao Yu after he became the palace master of Chunyang Palace. Based on this alone, Xianxia would not be grateful to the palace master of Chunyang Palace. So far, the palace master of Chunyang Palace was still very partial to the Bright Moon Hall master Liang Xiaoming. Including in this matter, Liang Xiaoming only said that he had a bad judgment of people and gently avoided all the blame. He did not even continue to investigate whether or not Liang Xiaoming had been involved in the plot to kill Xianxia. He only lightly let it go based on Liang Xiaoming's self-defense that he had been tricked by Chu Heng. Although this method added a little punishment later on, it still preserved the identity of Bright Moon Palace Master. The punishment of seclusion was not painful at all. After all, Xianxia was not a direct descendant of the Palace Master of Chunyang Palace. It was not worth it to give up the Bright Moon Hall Master for Xianxia's emotional consideration. If Xianxia wanted to change the balance, there was probably only one way left, which was to improve his strength until no one dared to ignore him. However, Xianxia did not need to think about these things for the time being. Even if he did, it would not help. Therefore, Xianxia accepted the reward from the palace master of Chunyang Palace happily and stood behind his master obediently. After dealing with this, the law enforcement hall naturally began to search for Chu Heng's whereabouts frantically. Du Qian could only apologize to Xianxia, as he could not choose a dwelling with him. Others made an appointment with Xianxia to choose the location of the Immortal's Cave, and first returned to their own Immortal's Cave to cultivate. As for Xianxia, he followed Gao Yu and returned to Gao Yu's dwelling first. My dwelling is simple and crude. Feel free to sit. Gao Yu's dwelling was indeed simple and crude. After returning to her own territory, Gao Yu was very relaxed. She did not continue to keep a straight face and allowed Xianxia to do as he pleased. This was how casual his master usually was in Xianxia's memories. Although it did not seem like there were rules between master and disciple, it was more like a home. Xianxia liked it very much. What is your current cultivation base? What are you good at? What kind of flying sword do you want me to refine for you? Without saying anything, Gao Yu first asked Xianxia about his requirements for a flying sword. This was the reward given to Xianxia by the palace master. Now that even the materials were provided, Gao Yu immediately began to work, for fear that her disciple would fail. Master is not busy. Take a break and wait for the disciple to serve you tea. How could Xianxia let Gao Yu be so tired? He took out a set of tea sets and tea leaves that had been prepared for a long time from the merit ring. He took out the spring water that he had searched for before the heavenly stairway gathering. The profound spirit furnace appeared directly and began to boil water for Gao Yu. Gao Yu liked to drink tea. This was her hobby. Xianxia certainly knew it. Everything, Xianxia had already searched for it and was just waiting for the moment to meet again. Seeing that Xianxia was so busy, Gao Yu was very surprised, But she also liked it very much, especially after smelling the smell of the tea leaves in Xianxian's hands. It was even more so. The tea carefully prepared by Xianxian happened to be the taste that Gao Yu liked, and Xianxian's way of brewing tea was novel, and the technique of brewing tea was skillful, which made Gao Yu full of expectations. The spring water that was heated by the profound spirit furnace was the most suitable for brewing tea, and it was poured into the teapot. After a series of procedures, Xianxian held the teacup in front of Gao Yu. "Master, please drink tea." When Gao Yu took it and slowly smelled the fragrance, Xianxian continued, "This tea is not old enough. After a few decades, Master will have the best tea to enjoy." "Tao, wait." Gao Yu didn't seem to be polite with Xianxian. She nodded directly and drank the tea in her hand. She praised loudly, "Good tea. Master, your immortal's cave is really simple and crude, and the spiritual power of the veins is insufficient." Xianxian knew Gao Yu's habit of drinking tea. Watching Gao Yu drink the tea that he had cooked himself, he was happy in his heart and said casually, "When the disciple chooses the location of the immortal's cave tomorrow, I will also choose a new immortal's cave for Master." Chapter 181. This immortal's cave mansion is simple and crude, and the spiritual power of the earth vein is insufficient? Listening to Xianxian's impolite evaluation, Gao Yu couldn't help but widen her eyes. She looked at Xianxian as if she was looking at a guy she had never seen before. Of course, in fact, today was only the first time Gao Yu and Xianxian met, so it was normal that they didn't know each other. "Master, rest assured, this disciple knows that there is a most suitable immortal's cave mansion on Meiqing Mountain. It's not a problem to build a few immortal's caves. Leave everything to this disciple." Xianxian was happy at the moment, patting his chest, not caring about Gao Yu's strange look at Xianxian. "You seem to know a lot of things, don't you?" Gao Yu was very smart, otherwise, she wouldn't have been Xianxian's master in her previous life. Looking at Xianxian, Gao Yu asked directly, "Even as the palace master said, you don't even need my guidance on cultivation, right? This disciple once memorized the scripture pavilion of the 9 Earth Mountain Villa, so naturally I know some things that others don't know." Xianxian replied with a smile, "However, this disciple will certainly ask Master for advice on cultivation problems. It was something that couldn't be helped in the past, but now it's not." Xianxian's words also made Gao Yu more and more curious about Xianxian. She couldn't help but pick up another cup of tea that Xianxian handed over, tilted her head and looked at Xianxian and asked, "What do you think if I also read the scripture pavilion?" The series of movements just now was so natural, and the two of them cooperated as if they had practiced it many times. If Master wants to be an alchemist or a refiner, then it's useful to read more books that can increase your knowledge. Xianxian shook his head and replied with a smile, "But if Master only wants to improve your cultivation, there is no benefit in reading these things. It's just a waste of time and energy. It's not worth it." And it makes sense. Gao Yu sat on the chair and nodded unconsciously. Her character was indomitable, and she really didn't like the tedious work of alchemy. If it weren't for her cultivation being inseparable from magic weapons, she might not even touch refining, let alone be interested in it. Xianxian's words directly dispelled her thoughts of going to the scripture pavilion to read books. However, if this question and answer was heard by people who didn't know the inside story, they might think that Gao Yu was a disciple and Xianxian was a master. The two said it so naturally and didn't feel anything wrong at all. In his previous life, Xianxian often discussed problems with his master like this. Gao Yu also liked this atmosphere, but it was rare to have such a tacit understanding when the master and apprentice first met. Next, Gao Yu had to taste the tea served by Xianxian in time, while testing Xianxian's cultivation base. She might not be able to give pointers on alchemy, but in terms of cultivation she was a Jiedon stage master after all. She would have more experience than Xianxian. In alchemy she might not be able to give pointers, but in cultivation she was, after all, a Jiedon stage master. How could she be more knowledgeable than Xianxian? The master didn't put on the airs of a master, but the disciple knew almost all of the master's preferences and served him very well. On the first day of apprenticeship, Xianxian and his master got along very well. This was the feeling that Xianxian dreamed of, and the disciple knew almost all of the master's preferences and served him very well. This was also the feeling that Xianxian dreamed of. He had been thinking about it for thousands of years, and he had been looking forward to it for 10 years after his rebirth. Now it really happened in front of Xianxian's eyes. Even with the mentality of Xianxian's great principle Golden Immortal, he couldn't help but be fascinated. Perhaps the strong expectation in his heart was satisfied, and his thoughts were clear. When he rested and practiced at night, Xianxian could even feel that the spiritual power seemed to flow more smoothly in the meridians. Especially the yin and yang 5-element secret art, there was a feeling of boiling. Early the next morning, Gong Sunling, Shanghai Feng and Wang Yuan rushed to the entrance of Gao Yu's Immortal's Cave. Yesterday, Xianxian made an appointment with them to find a location for his Immortal's Cave. Gao Yu also went, and everyone was not surprised. Finding a suitable Immortal's Cave for one's apprentice was what the master should do. However, Xianxian was a bit special, so he did it himself. But despite this, Xianxian had already said that he wanted her to give up her current Immortal's Cave, so Gao Yu had to go and see it. Gong Sunling was also very special. Although she had built her foundation a few years ago, she had not opened her own Immortal's Cave. Before Xianxian went to the Immortal Falling Abyss, he told Gong Sunling not to rush to choose an Immortal's Cave, and to wait until he came back. At this point, Gong Sunling did not know why, but she listened to Xianxian's advice and waited until now. It was said to find a location for Xianxian's Immortal's Cave, but in fact, it was to find 3 Immortal's Caves for Gong Sunling, Gao Yu, and Xianxian. The scope of Meiqing Mountain was very large, more than 1,000 miles. The location of Chunyang Palace was on the highest peak of Meiqing Mountain. This was the place with the densest spiritual energy in the earth veins, and it was also the place where the Immortal's Caves of Chunyang Palace were most concentrated. Of course, Xianxian would not choose to be crowded with so many people. Even if the spiritual power was strong, it would be almost the same if so many people divided it. Therefore, Xianxian directly took everyone to fly slowly along a small ridge of Meiqing Mountain, pretending to feel the spiritual power, but in fact he had already determined the goal. Here. Gao Yu looked at the place where Xianxian landed and couldn't help but frown. The others also looked puzzled, but no one questioned it. They just followed Xianxian to the ground, and then carefully felt the surrounding spiritual power. The place where they landed was a valley that was not too big but not too small. The scenery here was very good. There were mountains on all sides. They were not high, but they were just enough to block the wind from all directions. It was only a distance of half an hour from the main hall of Chunyang Palace, which was not too far or too close. Junior brother Yang, the spiritual power here seems to be ordinary, right? It was not easy for others to ask, so Gong Sunling was the most suitable person to ask. Shengguan Feng and Wang Yuan were here to help, and Gao Yu was Xianxian's master, so it was not easy to question them. Only Gong Sunling, who was looking for an Immortal's Cave, was the most suitable person to ask. On the surface, it seemed so. Xianxian smiled and did not hide it from everyone. However, I once found a very interesting jade slip on an assassin. The jade slip recorded an underground spiritual vein that he accidentally discovered. In the area of Meiqing Mountain, there were also many individual cultivators, and Chunyang Palace allowed them to exist. If these people wandered around occasionally, they might find something that the people of Chunyang Palace did not know. Moreover, the assassin was dead. No one could prove whether he had found it or not. Everything could be blamed on the dead man. Where is it? When Xianxian said this, everyone became interested. A hidden underground spirit vein was definitely something that cultivators yearned for even in their dreams. Chapter 182. Xianxian stretched out his finger and pointed at his feet, smiling without saying a word. This place was a super strong earth vein that was discovered after 200 years. Although it was not as good as the earth vein in the main hall of Chunyang Palace, only a few of them used it, and the effect was better than that in the main hall. Everyone immediately followed his movements and looked at Xianxian's feet. However, no matter how they looked, no matter how they sensed the spiritual power or explored with their divine senses, they could not see anything strange here. An ordinary small valley had nothing to do with the underground spirit vein at all. Don't be in a hurry. Should we encircle this place first? Xianxin knew everyone's doubts, but he did not immediately start to get the underground spiritual veins out. Instead, he put forward such a suggestion: otherwise, when we get the underground spiritual veins, maybe we will be given a share by others. You all know that I don't like the people of Bright Moon Palace. Yang Chen's suggestion was just to everyone's liking. Even within the sect, the competition for resources was very fierce. Bright Moon Palace was now relatively strong, so naturally, they had more resources. At least half of the small courtyards closest to the center of Chunyang Palace with the most spiritual power belonged to Bright Moon Palace. For some reason, Gao Yu did not seem to have any doubts about Yang Chen. It seemed that if Yang Chen said there was an underground spirit vein here, then there must be. Without saying a word, she directly flew up on her sword. In an instant, she turned into a stream of light in the air and went straight to the main hall of Chunyang Palace, leaving a lingering voice in the air: I will report to the palace master and move my cave residence here. Gao Yu's cave residence was also very close to the center of Chunyang Palace. It was unknown how many people coveted it. At this time, if Gao Yu wanted to move it out, there would definitely be people who would be happy. It was believed that the palace master would also be very happy. People like Yang Chen who were willing to consider the sect were simply unique. Senior sister, what kind of cave residence are you going to build? Yang Chen wasn't in a hurry to start. He got a few stone chairs for everyone and sat down to chat. As he spoke, Yang Chen stretched out both his hands and a clump of flames began to change shape within his hands. All sorts of houses appeared in Yang Chen's hands like a revolving lantern. This time, when choosing the Immortal's Cave, Yang Chen definitely had a plan. Gong Sunling was a once-in-a-millennium genius, and his master Gao Yu was also a postnatal water spirit root full value. Plus Yang Chen himself, the three people were enough to set off a storm that would stun the entire cultivation world in the future. If the three of them were to gather together early, they would be able to complement each other's strengths, and their future development would be very smooth. Fortunately, Gong Sunling listened to Yang Chen's suggestion and did not build a cave residence, waiting for Yang Chen to come back. This also meant that the seeds he had planted earlier were beginning to bear fruit. Gong Sunling was able to side with Yang Chen, which had already established the absolute right to speak in Chunyang Palace in the future. Although the underground spirit vein under their feet was rich in spiritual power and was enough for the masters of the Yuanying stage to use, it was only the Immortal's Cave that Yang Chen prepared for Gao Yu and Gong Sunling before the Yuanying stage. As for the cultivation after the Yuanying stage, Yang Chen had a better choice, but at this time, he was not able to collect it. Gong Sunling was attracted by the house in Yang Chen's hands and began to slowly observe and appreciate it. Even Shanghai Feng and Wang Yuan joined in. Thinking of Wang Yuan's words about following his lead, Yang Chen suddenly became excited. It seemed that he should also unite a large force in Chunyang Palace. At that time, coupled with the strength of his future fellow apprentices, it would be enough to control the entire Chunyang Palace. If senior brother Shangguan and senior brother Wang are interested, it is better to move over. Yang Chen said to the two with a smile, the more people, the more lively it is, and everyone can be closer. Yang Chen's suggestion made the two very excited. Even Gao Yu, who was in the Jeton stage, did not hesitate to give up the cave residence in the main hall of Chunyang Palace, so it would not be bad here. However, they had their own masters, so it was not easy for them to make their own decisions. Shanghai Feng thought for a while and replied with uncertainty, when we go back and ask Master if it's okay, we will move over. Well, when the time comes, we will also pull senior brother Du Qian. We don't have to build a separate cave residence. We can directly build a large manor and choose our own rooms to live in. Yang Chen directly stopped the changes of the pavilions and turned to ask Gong Sunling, what does senior sister think? Alright. Gong Sunling just pondered a little and nodded in agreement. Then I will trouble senior sister to set up a few arrays around to encircle the site. Yang Chen was also not polite and directly began to ask Gong Sunling to work. After we build the cave residence, I will take senior sister to a super strong illusion array to have a look. Maybe the world can move that illusion array around our cave residence. Xianxian was talking about the illusion array arranged by the predecessor when he was collecting the sword case. For the current Gong Sunling, it was definitely a weapon for self-defense after mastering it. Anyway, he didn't need it, and the fertile water should not flow to outsiders. It was just right for Gong Sunling. Gao Yu left quickly and came back quickly. After a while, she came down with a sword light and rushed to Yangqin. I have already talked to the head of the palace, and the palace master agreed. Now you show me how strong this underground spiritual vein is. After that, the sword light scattered, and there were a few more people in the open space. 4 of them were Xinda, He Lian, Yuan Ting, and Gu Kun. The rest were also the servants of Gao Yu and Gong Sunling. They were brought together, and when the time came, they would also be asked to contribute. With the consent of the head of the palace, everything was easy. However, Yangqin still made a lot of preparations in advance. Gong Sunling's array was also arranged. In addition to protection, a spirit gathering array and a spirit sealing array were specially arranged. The spiritual energy was gathered underground, and the spiritual energy was blocked above to prevent the spiritual energy from overflowing. After all the preparations were made, Yangqin began to make his move. Taking out the 64 middle-grade spirit stones of the same size that had already been prepared, Yangqin placed them on the ground in a very regular pattern, plus other various array materials, and soon a formation that no one had seen before was arranged. Everyone looked at it for a while, and even Gong Sunling, who specialized in arrays, did not see what kind of array it was. For Yangqin, this junior brother, she felt more and more mysterious. After arranging the array, Yangqin stepped back a few steps and began to control the operation of the array. In a moment, the ground within the scope of Yangqin's array flashed with a dazzling white light. The white light was very bright, but it was condensed and did not disperse, as if a phantom of a giant beast began to dig into the ground. But if you look closely, you can find that it seems that nothing has been dug up. However, soon everyone felt a majestic spiritual power getting closer and closer, rushing up from the ground. After a while, the spiritual power sprayed out from the ground like a fountain, and the spirit-gathering array instantly became very bright. Everyone was directly enveloped by this crazily spurting spiritual power. Chapter 183. In the beginning, when Yangqin took out 64 middle-grade spirit stones, Shanghai Feng and Wang Yuan still felt a little pain. It must be known that the 64 middle-grade spirit stones were the same size, and each of them was a full 10 jin. If converted, it would be 64,000 kilograms of low-grade spirit stones. So many spirit stones, even if Shanghai Feng and Wang Yuan joined with Gong Sunling, it was estimated that they could not come up with so many spirit stones, but Yangqin did not even blink and took them out. Needless to say, just the spiritual power absorbed from so many spirit stones was comparable to a lower-grade spiritual vein. Yangqin actually used so many things to arrange a formation that they could not understand. It was simply extravagant. Fortunately, everyone knew that Yangqin was rich. Needless to say, just the successful refining of the heaven-seizing pill, presumably Elder Wu Xiong would not treat Yangqin badly, and the spirit stones were just a trivial thing. Everyone just felt pity for the consumption of so many spirit stones. However, when this surging and majestic spiritual power surged out, everyone no longer had any thoughts of pity. Compared with this underground spiritual vein, not to mention 640 jin of middle-grade spirit stones, even 6,400 jin, or 64,000 jin was definitely worth it. Such a spiritual vein was enough to be compared with 80% of the entire Chunyang Palace's main vein. And only a few of them could use it. Now Shanghai Feng and Wang Yuan did not need to ask their master. They could be sure that if their master knew about the situation of the spiritual vein here, he would definitely urge them to move over. The master did not have this opportunity and face to move over, but the disciple had this opportunity, what was there to refuse, and quickly move over. Including those servants, everyone was surrounded by a thick and almost impenetrable spiritual power. There was only one consistent feeling, and that was, it was extravagant. This was too extravagant. Such a rich spiritual power was enough for hundreds of people in the Pure Yang Palace to use, but it was only used by these few people. In addition to extravagance, they couldn't think of any other words to describe it. At first, Gao Yu thought that it was just a spiritual vein similar to her original cave house. At first, she didn't hold much hope, but when this spiritual power gushed out wildly, even the Zhedan stage master couldn't help but be stunned, almost couldn't believe everything she perceived. Is this true? Gao Yu was not the only one who had this idea. The others also felt like they were in a dream. Compared to the past, if their original cave residents could only have a small stream of water to quench their thirst, this place could directly take a bath and swim, and it was a huge swimming pool. Isn't this a little too exaggerated? Gao Yu stuttered out these words. The kind of ecstasy on her face plus the unbelievable expression made Xianxian look at it and almost became crazy. In this life, what Xianxian wanted to see most was Gao Yu's beautiful smiling face. Now was the first time. In the future, Xianxian would do countless things to make Gao Yu happy. Gao Yu's smiling face made Xianxian feel that all the previous efforts were completely worth it. While everyone was in shock, after secretly appreciating his master's happiness for a while, Xianxian coughed softly, waking everyone up from that kind of intoxication. Should we start to build our immortal's cave first? Xianxian reminded everyone, and everyone remembered that they should get down to business. Fortunately, everyone was equally intoxicated, including the Zhedan stage master Gao Yu, but no one laughed at anyone's problem. Xianxian had just proposed a large manor. Gao Yu clapped her hands in favor. She liked the feeling of home. Xianxian's suggestion almost spoke to her heart. They were all cultivators, everyone showed their magical powers, and the small valley became completely different within 10 days. The continuous villas that covered the entire valley were quickly built. Pavilions, small bridges, flowing water, everything was built like a luxurious villa. Shengguan Feng Wang Yuan returned to Chunyang Palace once and brought all his servants over. As expected, their master immediately chased them over. When the villa was built, even the head of the palace and Zhu Chintao, the master of the medicinal hall, rushed over to celebrate. There was no intention to hide it from the palace master. However, when they walked in through the peripheral formation, there was still no image of the Yuanying stage ancestors and the Zhedan stage masters, and they opened their mouths in amazement on the spot. This is the spiritual vein that you found? The palace master recovered very quickly, even if he almost drooled with envy, but he quickly recovered his composure. Yes, palace master. Gao Yu, as the most senior person among the people, answered the question of the palace master, and then asked with a smile, why, does the palace master regret it? Or, the palace master will also move over? This is your fate, you can't force it. The palace master was very envious, but he still shook his head and refused Gao Yu's polite invitation. After calming down, the palace master was also very happy. In any case, this was used by the disciples of Chunyang Palace, and the two genius disciples who were hard to meet in 100 years were in it. The meat was rotten in the pot, and the benefits were still from Chunyang Palace. The palace master looked for a while and nodded with satisfaction. He didn't care whether the building was exquisite or not, but the abundant spiritual power and the complementary spirit gathering array and spirit locking array were just right. Almost everyone could cultivate on top of a spirit gathering array. In Chunyang Palace, this was the treatment of the most core disciples, but here, even servants could do it. Does this villa have a name? After appreciating it, the palace master couldn't help but ask. I was about to ask the palace master to give it a name. Gao Yu also knew how to make the palace master happy and directly handed over this power to the hands of the palace master. Well, since you are from the Liang Hall, this place is called the Liang Courtyard. The palace master was not pretentious. After a little thought, he gave a name. After giving the name, the palace master asked Yangchen and Gong Sunling, Yangchen, Gong Sunling, this is also your cave residence. Today is a happy time for you to move in. What do you want to say? Disciple thanks the palace master for giving me a name. Gong Sunling just bowed to thank him and did not say anything else. The palace master nodded slightly and raised his hand to indicate that Gong Sunling did not need to be too polite, but his eyes were fixed on Yangchen. Everyone knew that Yangchen was the one who found this spiritual vein, and the palace master also wanted to know what Yangchen would say. Disciple has a small matter to ask the palace master for help. Facing the palace master of Chunyang Palace, Yangchen did not care about the huge difference in their identity and cultivation. He directly made a request as if he was facing an ordinary elder. "What's the matter?" the palace master asked curiously. Disciple got some 5-element spirit marrow in the immortal falling abyss, and I want to ask the palace master to help me expand the spiritual vein. As Yangchen said this, a Qinkuan bag appeared in his hand, but it was unknown which guy he killed. He opened the pouch and poured out the spirit marrow inside. Chapter 184. This. Looking at the huge pile of spiritual essence, everyone felt as if they had been suddenly restricted. They stood rooted to the ground, unable to move. Dozens of eyes were completely attracted by the pile of spiritual essence on the ground and could no longer be pulled away. Everyone was stunned, even the head of the palace was no exception. Even if they had not been to the immortal falling abyss, they knew the existence of the 5 elements spiritual essence and understood its role. That was a good thing that could improve the quality of the earth's veins and increase the total amount of spiritual power. Even the head of the palace, at this moment, looked at the large pile of 5 elements spiritual essence and could not say anything. The palace lord had seen the spiritual marrow before and had even used it himself. However, he had never seen so much spiritual marrow gathered together. Which disciple who went to the immortal falling abyss brought back more than 10,000 spiritual essence? It was always the joint efforts of a few disciples, after 10 years in the immortal falling abyss, to be able to save 50,000 spiritual essence. After returning to the sect, they would transform a certain underground spiritual vein and share it with everyone. Yangchen, a disciple of the Qi refining stage, actually directly took out such a large pile of spiritual essence? Looking at the huge pile on the ground, it was definitely more than 50,000, it may even be 100,000. What made everyone even more indignant was that so many of the 5 elements spiritual essence that everyone treasured, Yangchen actually piled it directly on the ground, and looking at the appearance of the Qinkuan bag in Yangchen's hand, they did not know which rogue cultivator used it. It was bad to the extreme. Even in the heart of the head of the palace, there was suddenly an unsuppressible envy. Such a rich spiritual power, coupled with so many 5 elements spiritual essence, this fierce sun courtyard with only more than 20 servants, was simply better than the treatment of the head of the sect. For a time, the head of the palace wished he could shout at Yangchen. There was already such a rich spiritual power here, what was the point of wasting these spiritual essences? How many of these spiritual essences are here? Gao Yu was also dumbfounded, but relatively speaking, Yangchen had brought her enough surprises these days, so she almost had a kind of immunity. But even so, Gao Yu was still stunned for a moment before asking this question. Not much, exactly 100,000. Yangchen answered casually, which made people want to grab him and beat him up. 100,000 5-element spiritual marrow was not a lot? How could anyone endure this? Because of Yangchen's answer, everyone's gaze shifted from the spirit marrow to Yangchen. Yangchen shrugged his shoulders helplessly and replied innocently, "Elder Wu gave it to me. You guys know that he has a lot of these things." This answer also made everyone understand. Wu Xiong was an elder overseeing the immortal fallen abyss, and he had been overseeing it for hundreds of years. It was no surprise that he had so much spiritual marrow on him. Moreover, compared to the value of the heaven-seizing pill, this bit of spirit marrow was really nothing. Everyone couldn't help but envy Yangchen's good luck. Of course, they were even more curious about Yangchen's alchemy ability. To be valued by Elder Wu, it was by no means an ordinary technique. The head of the palace and Zhu Chintao even made a decision that in the future, they would definitely come to the fierce sun courtyard. Maybe there would be some great benefits coming to the door. Little did they know that Yangchen had such an idea in his heart. As the head of the palace, of course, it was not good to blatantly rob the immortals' cave opened by the disciples, but it was okay to come and see it often. Anyway, the spiritual energy of the feng shui line was not bad for 1 or 2 Yuaning stage masters. On the contrary, if the head of the palace often appeared, the status of the fierce sun courtyard would be improved imperceptibly. The other disciples who did not have eyes and wanted to make trouble would also have to think about it. Although the head of the palace had expelled Chu Heng from the sect and let the bright moon temple master Liang Xiaoming face the wall and reflect on himself, the friends and disciples of these two people would definitely cry out for them. They would definitely look for opportunities to suppress and retaliate. Zhanxian did not care about these little tricks, but he did not want his master to be disturbed by these people and ruin his mood for no reason. With the head of the palace often coming over, which guy with no eyes dared to talk and move around? Moreover, if the head of the palace and Zhu Chintao came often, including Zhanxian, everyone would be able to get close to them. If there was a problem in cultivation, they could ask them for advice. Could it be that as the palace master, if the disciples came to ask for advice, could they be thrown out? Don't look at Zhanxian's cultivation experience as a great principal golden immortal, but it was limited to the fire cultivation. The cultivation experience of other high-level spiritual power was completely absent. If he could get advice from others, Zhanxian was also eager. Are you going to use all these here? Since this plan was made, the head of the palace did not mind that the conditions here were better. He casually asked a question but did not wait for Zhanxian to answer. He had already started. The 5-element spirit marrow was used to optimize the spiritual veins. The higher the cultivation base, the better the effect. The palace master was of course the most appropriate. However, there was still a little bit of regret in his words. I asked the palace master to take action. Zhanxian hurriedly bowed and replied. He had already understood the meaning of the palace master's words. He didn't mind using a little 5-element spirit marrow to exchange for the favor of most people in Chunyang Palace. Therefore, he took out a Qiankuan bag and respectfully held it with both hands and sent it to the palace master. These are the gifts of this disciple to the sect, please accept them. There more? Everyone was used to Zhanxian's generosity. They were just surprised in their hearts, but no one said it out. The palace master was very surprised. He took it and explored it with his spiritual awareness. He was stunned again. In the Qiankuan bag, there were also 100,000 5-element spirit marrow. The palace master thought a little and already understood the meaning of Zhanxian. He nodded to Zhanxian and put away the Qiankuan bag. In this case, I will exempt you from the contribution of entering and exiting my Chunyang Palace Scriptures Pavilion in the future. In addition, I will allow you to enter my Chunyang Palace Secret Pavilion once. Yes, Palace Master. Zhanxian didn't thank him. This was what he got with 100,000 spiritual marrow. He felt at ease and didn't need to thank him. The Palace Master had these 100,000 spirit essences, but he was sure that all the imbalances in the pure Yang Palace would be completely suppressed. Although Zhanxian found this place and built his own cave residence, there were many jealous people. Today they would talk about this, and tomorrow they would talk about that, which would inevitably cause a lot of trouble. These were enough to shut everyone's mouth. While the palace lord was muttering to himself in delight, the 100,000 pieces of spirit essence on the ground seemed to have grown legs of their own as they separated according to their different attributes. Then, they flew up high and plunged into the newly opened exit of the earth vein. All as well. The master acted so quickly. The palace master directly said the result. Remember to leave a room for me. In addition, prepare a few more guest rooms, which may be useful. Chapter 185. The palace master's words had already set the tone for the privileges of the fierce sun courtyard in the future. In addition to the people that Zhanxian had invited at the beginning, other people who wanted to enter the fierce sun courtyard in the future would be rewarded after making meritorious deeds. Of course, Zhanxian would not only invite the palace master, Zhu Chintao would also leave a room for him. Of course, Meng Xian of the Law Enforcement Hall would also have a room. The Foreign Affairs Hall Master Su Qingxin, plus the current Fierce Sun Hall Master Qiao Ming, since it was called the Fierce Sun Courtyard, the fierce Sun Hall master would not be unreasonable. He believed that with the care of these people, there would not be any major disturbances in the fierce Sun courtyard in the future. As for the hall master of the Bright Moon Hall, Liang Xiaoming, didn't he have to face the wall and reflect on himself? When he came out, he would pretend to forget. Who could say anything? Liang Xiaoming still had the nerve to run over and ask a junior for it? With the newly opened underground spirit vein and the enhancement and optimization of 100,000 pieces of spirit marrow, these people in the fierce Sun courtyard were so happy that they did not know what to say. Under Gao Yu's instructions, everyone found their own room and then began to cultivate in a hurry. Some time ago, they had been building the villa, and now they had the time to feel the complete spirit vein here. For Yangchen, several times in a row, everyone was used to the surprises he could always bring to everyone. However, everyone was very grateful to Yangchen. If it wasn't for Yangchen, everyone would not have such a good immortal's cave to cultivate in. Even their slaves were also touched by the light, and the treatment was better than most of the masters in the pure Yang Palace. Seeing that everyone had begun to settle down, Yangchen was also gratified. This was the first gift he had prepared for his master, a better cultivation environment, and the first stronghold for him to take revenge on the Taishanmen in the future. A cunning rabbit has 3 burrows, and the Chunyang Palace was the first. The Taishanmen was not a small sect. It was a lower realm sect of the Xianxian sect in the immortal world. It could be said to be the foundation of the Xianxian sect, and it was one of the major forces in charge of the heavenly court. It was simply impossible for one person to deal with it. Yangchen needed to gather all the forces he could in order to complete it. It took Yangchen 10 years to become a disciple of his master again. Next, Yangchen's goal was how to let Master Gaoyu realize that her innate fire spirit root was actually not as good as her acquired water spirit root, and change to the water attribute cultivation method. This was an arduous task. Asking a Jedon stage master to give up his original cultivation base, and then start to practice another attribute cultivation method from the beginning, this was by no means a few words. He believed that even if the current head of the palace issued an order, Gaoyu would not necessarily recultivate. Not only did this require a deeper relationship between the two parties, but it also required a suitable opportunity. Obviously, it was not the right time to become the disciple. Fortunately, Yangchen was patient and determined. Even if it took another 10 years, Yangchen could afford to wait. Moreover, now even if Gaoyu did not change to the water cultivation method in the future, her fire attribute cultivation could also reach the nascent soul realm, so there was no need to worry about her safety for the time being. Next, Yangchen plunged into the scriptures pavilion of Chunyang Palace and once again began his daily life of reading. When the master of Chunyang Palace returned to Chunyang Palace, he immediately informed the entire sect of Yangchen's offering of 100,000 spirit essence. In this way, everyone praised him, and everyone could get benefits. Who didn't know how to praise him verbally? The manager of the scriptures pavilion also received the instructions of the palace master and was very polite to Yangchen. After the news of Yangchen refining the heaven-seizing pill came back, Chunyang Palace knew that Yangchen had read a lot of books and had memorized the scriptures pavilion of the 9 Earth Mountain Villa. With this precedent, it was natural to come to the scriptures pavilion of Chunyang Palace. After declining the manager's good intention to take Yangchen to visit the scriptures pavilion, Yangchen came to the scriptures pavilion alone. The scriptures pavilion of the inner mountain gate of Chunyang Palace was completely different from the scriptures pavilion of the 9 Earth Mountain Villa, but the scale was more than 100 times larger. There were 100,000 jade slips in the 9 Earth Mountain Villa, but there were more than 10 million here. Zither, chess, calligraphy, painting, medicine, divination, astrology, everything. There were almost all kinds of jade slips. Moreover, one couldn't just casually look at any jade slip here. There were some jade slips that recorded local customs and scenery that were open to everyone, but jade slips that were related to cultivation methods, elixirs, artifact refinement arrays, and so on, could only be accessed if one had the corresponding cultivation level to open the protective restriction. After Yangchen came in, he went straight to the cultivation method area. There were only a few cultivation methods of the yin and yang 5 elements secret art suitable for cultivation after the foundation establishment stage. The others were still for the qi refining stage. Although the other attributes of the cultivation methods had not yet reached the foundation establishment stage, Zhanxian also had to prepare some profound cultivation methods for himself to prepare for a rainy day. In his previous life, Zhanxian had always focused on the cultivation of the fire attribute and rarely dabbled in other attributes, resulting in a pitiful number of cultivation methods in other aspects in his memory. Now entering the scriptures pavilion of Chunyang Palace was like a poor boy entering a treasure house. Zhanxian would certainly not be polite. With the yin and yang 5 elements secret art in hand, what restriction below the Zhedan stage could stop Zhanxian from reading? In the cultivation method area, the cultivation methods below the foundation establishment stage, Zhanxian simply looked at them one by one. With a sweep of his spiritual awareness, the content of the cultivation method immediately entered his mind, and then began to analyze the advantages and disadvantages of the cultivation method. With the cultivation experience of the great principle Golden Immortal, combined with the previous experience of practicing the yin and yang 5 elements secret art, he could immediately analyze the characteristics of this cultivation method, whether it was suitable for him, what were the flaws. Zhanxian could basically give a direction for modification now. If it was suitable for himself, Zhanxian would immediately remember it in his heart. The powerful effect of the 3 purities secret art, in addition to being far beyond the spiritual awareness of others, was far beyond the memory of others. In just 2 days, Zhanxian had memorized no less than hundreds of sets of cultivation methods. The improvement of the realm of cultivation brought not only the improvement of spiritual power, but also the speed of reading the jade slips. Every day, Zhanxian only stayed in the scriptures pavilion for 2 hours, and when the time came, he left directly. Back to the fierce sun courtyard to cultivate the yin and yang 5 elements secret art, the heavenly spirit treasure refining secret art and the earth fiend sacrificial formation secret art took turns to refine the profound spirit furnace and the sword sheath, and then a universe treasure raising secret art. After each such cycle, the state of the foundation stage began to stabilize rapidly, and the spiritual power began to increase in an orderly manner, preparing to hit the second level of the foundation stage. On the second day after the opening of the fierce sun courtyard, Gao Yu went to a sect internal meeting at the level of the Zhedan stage in the Chunyang Palace. When she came back and saw Zhanxian, she directly said, "There are a lot of people coveting the courtyard, and the reward that the palace master gave you to enter the secret pavilion has also been questioned." Chapter 186. The fierce sun courtyard had indeed caused a great dispute within the Chunyang Palace. A spiritual vein comparable to the spiritual vein of the main hall of the Chunyang Palace had been discovered. It was definitely a big deal in any sect. However, such a spiritual vein was actually occupied by a Zhedan stage master with a few disciples in the foundation stage. Even their servants who had not reached the foundation stage had taken advantage of it. How could this not make many people jealous? The sect's general meeting was to discuss this matter. In addition to those who were in seclusion and going out, the grandmasters and ancestors who stayed in the Chunyang Palace all appeared and launched a huge discussion in the main hall of the Chunyang Palace. Of course, before this, the head of the palace first announced the 100,000 5-element spirit essence that Zhanxian had offered. Naturally, the reward promised by the head of the palace was not concealed. This is unfair, and it will chill the hearts of the disciples. Immediately, someone jumped out to oppose it, and it was Liang Xiaoming, the master of the Bright Moon Palace, who had a relatively high status. Although he was facing the wall and reflecting on his mistakes, he was allowed to participate in this sect's general meeting. In fact, this was originally instigated by him. After learning about the news of the fierce sun courtyard, especially after the discovery of a spiritual vein comparable to the main vein of the Chunyang Palace, Liang Xiaoming had an idea. Even if he was facing the wall and reflecting on his mistakes, he still mobilized his own power and convened the sect's general meeting. Meiqing Mountain is originally the Chunyang Palace. Any spiritual vein found should belong to the Chunyang Palace, and should not be occupied by a few juniors. Liang Xiaoming's words represented the voice of a large group of Chunyang Palace disciples. Everyone was jealous of the abundant spiritual power resources of the spiritual vein, but they needed a high-sounding excuse. The fierce sun courtyard did not say that it would be separated from the Chunyang Palace. Of course, it is still the Chunyang Palace. The head of the palace seemed to have figured out a lot of things. In the face of Liang Xiaoming's doubts, he just gave a faint answer. Behind him, there were also several nascent soul stage elders who had been in seclusion and did not meddle in other people's business. This time, they were instigated by Liang Xiaoming. As for being occupied by a few juniors, this earth vein was originally discovered by them, and I also allowed them to build their own cave abodes in Meiqing Mountain. They didn't violate the rules, nor did they violate the sect rules, so how can they talk about occupying it? What should I do or shouldn't I do? In response to Liang Xiaoming's statement, the palace master lightly retorted, "Hall Master Liang, could it be that you want to rob a few disciples of their belongings? Since they are the disciples of Chunyang Palace, they should think for our Chunyang Palace. This Terra vein should be shared by the disciples of Chunyang Palace instead of being monopolized by a few people." Liang Xiaoming did not beat around the bush and went straight to the point. At least half of the people present had the same thought as him. Everyone was thinking about how to say it. With Liang Xiaoming taking the lead, there were naturally people who agreed. The disciples of Chunyang Palace should share what they have discovered with the sect. This is good. The palace master nodded, glanced at several nascent soul stage elders and slowly said, "Yang Chen has already offered 100,000 5-element spirit marrow to my Chunyang Palace, which is considered to be shared with the sect. I don't know how much spirit marrow did Hall Master Liang offer to the sect when he came out of the immortal falling abyss?" With just one sentence, Liang Xiaoming's face turned red. In the past, he got tens of thousands of spirit marrow from the immortal falling abyss. Later, he and several other brothers worked together to optimize his own cave abode's spiritual vein. When did he hand over half of it to the sect? We are talking about the present. A nascent soul stage elder behind the palace master said, "Let the past be in the past." Elder Lin is right. Palace master Zhang Jiao immediately took over the topic of Elder Lin Yunfeng. The past, let it be in the past. Yang Chen's discovery of the spiritual vein was also a matter of half a month ago. Now there is no need to discuss it, right? Lin Yunfeng directly shut up and stopped talking. He was an elder, but he was only an elder, not a palace master. Now that the palace master said this, it was obvious that he was already a little annoyed. Some disputes could happen at the elders' meeting, but they could not sing a different tune with the palace master at the sect meeting. Liang Xiaoming thought that Elder Lin could pull back a city for him, but the palace master climbed up the pole and turned Yang Chen's spiritual vein into a thing of the past. How could this make Liang Xiaoming satisfied? Seeing that Elder Lin had somewhat calmed down, Liang Xiaoming had to say again, "Palace master, you can't say that. A few pieces of spirit marrow will not have any impact on my Chunyang Palace, but a main vein is different. He is a disciple of the foundation stage. It is definitely a waste to use this main vein. It should be used by people who need it more." AI. The palace master sighed softly, and he was very unhappy with Liang Xiaoming's attitude. To say that the relationship with Taishanmen was the most intimate in Chunyang Palace, it was Liang Xiaoming. Maybe Chu Heng's initial difficulty with Yang Chen was benefited from Liang Xiaoming. It's just that there has been no evidence, and the palace master did not want to move him, but unexpectedly he became more and more excessive. The Grand Master of the Peak Jidan stage began to embarrass a younger generation disciple everywhere. It was really disappointing. Gao Yu, as the person involved, had the qualification to attend the sect meeting, but had no right to speak. Looking at Liang Xiaoming targeting Yang Chen like this, with her character, she couldn't help but refute. However, without waiting for Gao Yu to speak, the palace master had already asked again, "If this is the case, Hall Master Liang just got a superb flying sword 3 months ago. It is a waste for you, a Jidan stage master, to use it. There are still a few Yuanying stage ancestors in my sect who do not have such a good flying sword. Hall Master Liang, shouldn't it be used by people who need it more? In terms of seniority, You are Xianxian's uncle master. How can you set an example for the younger generation disciples? The same thing happening to others and happening to oneself were two completely different things. The top-grade flying sword that Liang Xiaoming had just obtained was of a higher grade than any of the flying swords he had used before. He was about to use the opportunity of facing the wall to completely refine it, so how could he be willing to obediently hand it over? Before waiting for Liang Xiaoming to think about how to deal with it, the palace master had made another decision. Since everyone is willing to do this, it is better for us to test it in the sect's Bright Moon Hall first. In the future, if the disciples of the Bright Moon Hall have any gains, all of them will be handed over to the sect. Waiting for the sect's distribution, no private possession is allowed. So let's try it out for a few decades to see how the effect is. If the disciples of the Bright Moon Hall are united and sincerely support it, and can make our sect flourish, we will hold another sect meeting and list this as the rule of my Chunyang Palace. How about it? These words came out, and without waiting for everyone to vote, the palace master added another condition. Those who agree to do this will also participate in the trial. As long as the effect is outstanding, it is okay to change the rules. After that, the palace master turned behind him. Facing several elders of the Yuanying stage, he smiled and asked, "Several elders, what do you think?" Chapter 187. This kind of condition, it would be strange if someone agreed to it. Everyone knew that it was easy to rob other people's things, but it was extremely difficult to hand over one's own things. Whoever agreed would hand over their own property to the sect, and then let the sect distribute it. Who is a fool? Gao Yu did not expect that the palace master would support Yangchen so much. She was surprised and happy to sit quietly and did not say anything more. She just smiled and looked at the performance of the various people around her. Those who had previously supported Liang Xiaoming also reacted at this moment. If they agreed to Liang Xiaoming's proposal today and seized the feng shui vein discovered by Yangchen, then the good things they found tomorrow could be taken away. The palace master obviously considered this problem and rejected Liang Xiaoming's proposal. Liang Xiaoming himself did not make a decision. If he wanted to share Yangchen's feng shui vein with the sect, his best flying sword would have to be taken away and shared with the sect. The sharing of the spiritual power of the feng shui vein was only a matter of how much it was absorbed, but if the flying sword was given to others, it could be taken away and he would not leave a little bit. If he didn't give it, the suggestion was put forward by himself. If he gave it, he was reluctant to give it up. Moreover, once he agreed, it meant that all the gains of the Bright Moon Palace for decades must belong to the sect. Not to mention others, Liang Xiaoming could not guarantee that he could bear the pressure of the disciples of the Bright Moon Palace. Now this matter really put Liang Xiaoming in a dilemma. Don't look at him as a Zhedan stage master. He was still suffocated to the point that his face was flushed and he was at a loss. Several elders who originally wanted to support Liang Xiaoming were all silent at the moment. When they were encouraged by Liang Xiaoming before, they thought that the discovery of this feng shui vein could greatly enhance the strength of the Chunyang Palace, and they did not consider too much. But now that the palace master said this truth, they were all old and experienced people. How could they not know the key? The so-called feng shui vein or spiritual power were secondary things. For a sect, the disciples of the sect were the most important. If all the disciples were disloyal, then the sect would not be far from decline. If he did not have enough earth veins, he could go outside to look for them. However, if he lost the will of the people, it would be impossible to gather it back. The silence lasted for a long time. No one spoke, which meant that no one agreed with the opinion of the head of the palace. In the past, I always thought that cultivators should follow the heavenly Tao and focus on fate. They should have less greed and jealousy. Palace Master Zhang Jiao looked at the crowd, and his eyes shot a ray of light. No matter where he looked, people would bow their heads and dare not look at the palace master. The palace lord's words were spoken slowly. Many people trembled when they heard it, as if they had comprehended something. Today I am very disappointed. The disciples present are either Zhedan or Yuanying stage ancestors, but they are greedy for a junior in the foundation establishment stage. The voice of the head of the palace suddenly became louder, with a huge anger, directly burning in all directions. Is my Chunyang Palace a famous righteous sect or a demonic cultivator? The rules of my Chunyang Palace are not allowed to kill my fellow disciples. What is it to snatch the things of the younger generation of the same sect? The anger of a Yuanying stage master, the terrifying pressure directly covered the entire Chunyang Palace. Whether it was a formal disciple or a servant, all of them were silent and did not dare to make any sound or make any movement. Today you robbed a junior's things, then tomorrow you can rob a senior's things. Today it is Zhanxian, tomorrow it will be you, so everyone grabs and grabs. One day when my Chunyang Palace faces a disaster, who will stand up to protect my sect? The head of the palace was angry that these people did not see the general situation. Or when your own life is hanging by a thread, who can you count on to help? No one dared to look up. It was the first time that the head of the palace was so angry in front of everyone. Even those who did not intend to support Liang Xiaoming bowed their heads. The palace master's abuse made everyone understand a lot of things. Although they were scolded, fortunately, today the palace master protected Yang Qin, and tomorrow he would be able to protect each of them. The spiritual power of the fierce sun courtyard is rich, everyone has a chance. After the slap, naturally he would also give a sweet date. The palace master said, in the future, if the disciples of the Chunyang Palace make enough contributions, they can be allowed to cultivate in the fierce sun courtyard for a year as a reward for the disciples of the sect. If you want to enter the fierce sun courtyard, you should work hard on this. If he gave everyone hope, there would be people who would work hard. Does anyone have anything to say? If not, go back to practice. Perhaps after the head of the palace was angry, he was no longer full of anger, and the pressure that made people afraid slowly dissipated. Only then did the people in the Chunyang Palace dare to move a little. About the spiritual veins, this disciple did not consider it well, and I asked the palace master to punish me. Liang Xiaoming quickly bowed his head and admitted his mistake. At this time, if he did not show his attitude, he would definitely be hostile to many people. But if he did not consider it well, he could give him a very decent way out. After all, people were not gods and they would always make mistakes. Moreover, from the very beginning, he had used the pretense of thinking for the sake of the sect. It was just a lack of consideration, and it was not a huge crime. However, the palace master, is it too much to allow Yang Qin to enter the secret pavilion once? This time, Liang Xiaoming did not target Yang Qin's spiritual veins, but changed to attack the reward for Yang Qin. Only the disciples who have made great contributions to the sect can have such treatment. Yang Qin only handed over 100,000 spiritual essence, and he is only allowed to contribute spirit stones. You should not make an exception to let him enter the secret pavilion, right? The secret pavilion was the core place of the Chunyang Palace, and one was only allowed to choose once. Those who did not make great contributions would not be rewarded. Liang Xiaoming's words were well-founded and well-organized, so that people could not say any mistakes. About the secret pavilion, I will discuss it with the elders again. This time, the palace master grasped all the right to speak and directly rejected Liang Xiaoming's doubts. However, Liang Xiaoming was still a little happy. After all, those elders would not be too happy after this time. Yang Qin's opportunity to enter the secret pavilion was basically lost. After the sect meeting, Gao Yu came back and saw Yang Qin for the first time, and told Yang Qin this. After that, she patted Yang Qin's shoulder and encouraged him with a master style. The head of the palace has given you a lot of pressure this time. You have to cultivate carefully, and you can't disappoint the great expectations of the head of the palace and the master. Of course, Yang Qin immediately made a solemn vow, but his face showed a smile of success. Chapter 188. Gao Yu would not know what the palace master and the Yuanying stage elders said after the sects meeting. Other people probably would not know, but Yang Qin could guess. As Yang Qin expected, when the head of the palace and several elders met in the small council hall of the Pure Yang Palace, there was immediately an elder who blamed the head of the palace master. How can you protect a disciple in the foundation stage like this today? Even reprimanding all the Jiedan stage disciples? Although the other elders did not speak, everyone had the same expression on their faces. Today, the palace master was furious, and it was very awe-inspiring. However, these awe-inspiring airs could not be put in front of these elders. They just did not refute the palace master on the spot. After all, he was the palace master, and they could not damage his prestige. It's very simple. After the palace master sat down, he faintly replied, because Elder Wu Xiong has not yet ascended. As soon as this was said, several elders immediately understood. Xianxian helped Elder Wu Xiong to refine the heaven-seizing pill, which was now a well-known thing in the world. Although everyone did not know what happened in the refining process, according to rumors, Xianxian played an irreplaceable role. Wu Xiong even released words to protect Xianxian, which had fully explained the importance of Xianxian. Since everyone was not Wu Xiong's opponent, everyone still had to give face to the people under Wu Xiong's protection. Especially inside the Chunyang Palace, this was a great opportunity to make friends with Wu Xiong. The palace master's consideration was absolutely correct. In this case, the matter of the secret pavilion is still handled according to the previous procedures. There is no need to say anything more. Several elders nodded, and Elder Lin Yunfeng directly summed up on behalf of everyone, before Elder Wu Xiong ascends, don't let anyone make Xianxian feel wronged. However, in this way, Xianxian's cultivation will not have any bumps. Isn't it harming him? The elder at the side had a different opinion. In my opinion, it's better to take care of him appropriately. Let him face what he needs to face. As long as we support him in times of life and death, it'll be fine. As for other times, it's better to let him deal with it himself. Everyone was a nascent soul realm master, so they naturally knew that this elder's words were reasonable, so they all nodded after listening. No matter what, Xianxian was still a disciple of the sect. Someone might even be Xianxian's grandmaster. As elders, it was impossible for them to deliberately harm their own disciples. When Elder Wu ascends, how should he treat Xianxian? The one who asked was Xianxian's master ancestor, Gao Yu's master Wang Yong. In the previous discussion, he had never spoken. It was related to his own apprentices and grand disciples. Since the head of the palace had spared no effort in supporting them, he did not come out. However, upon hearing that the palace lord was only supporting Elder Wu Xiong because he had yet to ascend, he was a little displeased. Thus, he began to ask the palace lord about his future plans. The same, vigorously cultivate and vigorously maintain. The head of the palace replied without hesitation. Everyone knew the relationship between Xianxian and Wang Yong, and no one said anything. Hearing the palace master say this, at least Lin Yunfeng's face still showed a hint of disapproval. Xianxian climbed the heaven ladder. His will was tenacious, he got the spirit essence and he also knew to hand it over to the sect, and he succeeded in building his foundation without anyone's guidance. With such excellent perception, he is a genius disciple. The palace master smiled and replied faintly, if we don't train such a disciple, should we train Chu Heng who deceives his master? In one sentence, everyone had no opinion. What the palace master said was reasonable. A loyal and talented disciple was of course worth training, and it should be vigorously cultivated. This was the future of Chunyang Palace. At this point, they only wanted to be able to attack the realm of the Deshang stage and the glory of the sect. How could they be jealous of a younger generation disciple? Even if there is no such reason, in fact, I still have to vigorously defend Xianxian. After giving a high-sounding reason, the palace master did not mind telling his plans to the elders. He could see that some elders disagreed with this, but they did not express it. Of course, he had to unify everyone's attitude. When they heard the palace master say this, the elders were stunned. Besides this reason, was there any other reason? Everyone understood the character of the palace master. He would not take care of a younger generation disciple for no reason. Everyone pricked up their ears and listened to the reason of the palace master. If this reason could not convince Elder Lin, it was estimated that Elder Lin might retarget Xianxian one day in the future. Xianxian will refine the heaven-seizing pill. A few short words made everyone feel enlightened, and they instantly figured it out. To put it bluntly, if I don't vigorously protect Xianxian and cultivate Xianxian, when I need the heaven-seizing pill, who will help me refine it? If I don't use the disciple of my sect, Do I have to beg those guys? All the elders, including Elder Lin Yunfeng, were enlightened. Everyone, including Elder Lin Yunfeng, looked enlightened. If it was said that Xianxian was a disciple worthy of training, so everyone did not completely agree with it, this reason was enough to let everyone put down any prejudices and wholeheartedly support Xianxian. Everyone was in the stage of the Yuanying stage to the Deshang stage, and the ultimate goal was all to ascend. But everyone knew the difficulty of ascension. If they had the help of the heaven-seizing pill when they ascend, wouldn't it be much smoother? Xianxian played an irreplaceable role in the refining of the heaven-seizing pill. Didn't that mean that Xianxian really knew the refining method of the heaven-seizing pill? Whether it was public or private, there was no reason to fall out with a younger generation disciple. Even Lin Yunfeng was the same. The reason why he would have a different opinion was because of Liang Xiaoming's instigation. He was a Yuanying stage ancestor. How could he have any contradiction with a younger generation disciple who had only been in the sect for 10 years? No one knew what the palace master and the Yuanying stage elders said, but the palace master and the elders unanimously agreed that Xianxian could enter the secret pavilion once as a reward. In the same way, no one would know that Xianxian had been unanimously favored by the palace master and the elders. Xianxian could guess some of it, but he would not talk to anyone. He still maintained the previous routine of the past few days. Every day, he would go to the scriptures pavilion to read books, and then come back to practice, never stopping. The interior of the Pure Yang Palace seemed to be calm, and the occasional small waves also calmed down silently under the anger of the head of the palace. But it was no longer the Chunyang Palace of his previous life. Quietly, some subtle changes had taken place in Chunyang Palace from top to bottom. No one noticed it except for Xianxian. The Chunyang Palace of this life was slowly turning towards a road preset by Xianxian. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.